Welcome to the Mindful Journey podcast. This is your host, Brian McLaughlin. I'm a mental performance consultant at Mindful Mental Performance. And today we have on Andrew Martin, also known as Marty. He owns Marty Strength Coaching, Marty Strength Hockey. And without further ado, Marty, how are you?
Doing good, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Before we get into kind of, what you're up to and kind of your what you're all about. Just kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are. Yeah.
So I guess the simplest way to explain, what I do is I'm a coach. So I played hockey my whole life, and then got into coaching, strength and conditioning coaching pretty early. Actually, I was still in school. Jeff Schmogi, who was a senior when I was a freshman at school, he was a guy who started a really small group. And I think I was a sophomore when I actually started training other athletes. It was a good deal for me. I was getting paid to do it. Plus I was doing my workout with the athletes and I was training them. So I was pretty much getting everything done in 2 hours. So that's where it all kind of started for me in terms of that. And then a hockey coach. So I started coaching with Jeff Schmogi as well, and coached for about 8 years and been a strength coach ever since. But I guess my journey kind of started as me being an athlete. And then probably the most important part of my coaching career is me destroying my body training and
Yeah.
then learning from all of my injuries and the hardships that I went through, and then understanding and kind of getting a flip of, I was this person before. I think I knew everything.
Yeah.
And, very just unaware of the impact you have as a coach and what you can do. And not only, on the mental side, but on the physical side of what you can do to athletes. And then me on the other side, coming through the other end, going through so many things, that kind of catapulted me and changed everything.
So what was kind of like your experience with that? Like, was it a specific injury that happened to you? Was it a gradual thing? Kind of walk us through that.
So I never really experienced any type of, like, I guess, overuse injury, like something
Mm-hmm.
where you're doing something either wrong or too much. I had concussions when I was a junior, and that's a different story. That's why I retired from hockey years later. I've broken fingers and stuff like that just through impact, but I didn't really train until I went to school. I went to school, and that first month was just like eye opening. It was,
Mm-hmm.
you wake up, you train at 6 a.m., you go to school all day, you go back, you train again. When you're allowed to practice, you practice. Plus, you got a full week of insane fitness testing that I've never been through. So that was, the joke was that, and Coach Smokey, who talks about this, is, the older guys was like, this guy's going home.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Like, we had to do a 5 mile run at the very end of our training, and just because it was more like a mental toughness thing. And if you know me, I hate long distance running, and I don't do it with any of my hockey players. But the joke was I came in last by like 8 minutes. Like, I was running for like 8 minutes by myself, and the joke was I was going home. So I got into training very seriously. And I think when you're younger, and even though I was in school, I was still young, you just think you could do anything you want and push as hard as you want. And that's kind of the school mentality too, is always pushing.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a breaking point. I didn't miss a game. I didn't miss a practice until my senior year, where I just kind of had this pain in my stomach. Couldn't get out of bed, like pain when I sneezed and I coughed. I ended up having a sports hernia.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went through the process of having surgery, came back too quick, had another one, came back too quick, had another one. I ended up having four. I had to drastically look at what I was doing, the type of training I was doing, things that, I knew were bothering me, but it was on my program. So I was like, okay, I'm just supposed to do this. It's written on this piece of paper. This is the holy grail. I have to do it. So I
Mm-hmm.
went down that road of just creating so much, breakdown in my body. It was hard because, I went to pro. I couldn't finish 30 games because I was
Yeah.
always getting injured. So I had to change everything. So the hernia pathway of going down that was the one that kind of set everything off.
Mm-hmm. And then so what was kind of your training regimen from before you had the hernia to then after? Like what was it that you started to change, and what did you find more success with? Like obviously it's not long distance running.
It's definitely not long distance running. For me, that didn't help. Like I had to do that because when I went to school, I had to prepare for it, so it wouldn't actually just destroy me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a fast twitch athlete person. Like I can't long distance run. I can sprint. I'm
Mm-hmm.
fast, which is great for hockey. And the strength coach at school was like, I don't care how you do on this long distance run. You just have to do it, unfortunately. And I was like, in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm like, that makes no sense. Like, why do I have to do this? Because I do great on all the tests that actually mattered and said, okay, you probably perform well on the ice. The training was you get after it no matter what, no matter if you got something that's tweaking, something that doesn't feel good. The idea was usually if you get moving, it goes away. And you're like, okay, maybe it doesn't hurt anymore. Whereas we
Mm-hmm.
know it's, a day later, it's going to hurt even more. It's going to hurt even more than it was. Um, Probably the big shift for me was moving completely away from heavy bilateral squatting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just too like the front squats. We did front squats, you did front squats.
Yeah.
I trained athletes at that time, and the idea was someone would say, "Oh, my back kind of hurts." You get like 5% of people that say my back hurts. You're like, "Yeah, my back hurts too when I front squat. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine." Like that was the mentality. Whereas like there's got to be another option. So I switched to more, I would call it functional training, where I'm doing more single leg work,
Mm-hmm.
and everything changed. I got stronger. I felt better on the ice. I wasn't in pain. I didn't feel pain after my workouts. And that's just because I think I look back and maybe I just wasn't supposed to squat. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
something to do with my femur, maybe I had a little bit of a FAI in terms of the femur and the joint, but whatever it is. But I had to go through that myself. And I actually had to rehab myself from my hernias and research and learn about anatomy as a strength coach, which is probably the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially when you're training other athletes, you should know kind of what's going on with the body. When you did switch though, your whole training regimen, did you get a lot of like pushback from, say, your strength coach at UMass or any other coaches that say you were playing for? Did you get a lot of pushback for you?
So I think what happened, because I was pretty much out of school by then. So after the injury was my senior year. Now playing pro and the levels I was playing at in terms of, it wasn't like, the AHL or NHL level. You don't have a lot of training. A lot of it is either a couple things are set up, but you do most of it on your own if you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on the team. So I didn't have a lot of issues there. There was a couple teams I played on where, I just said no. I was like, I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
like, they were doing that training. I'm just like, I'm not doing it. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's, at that point I'd been training people in the summer for, in the off season for a couple of years. So at least I had that to say, it's like, okay, I kind of do this. I know what's right for me.
Yeah.
Um, Probably the biggest shift was in the training, like me, doing that and then trying to introduce it into the training. Cause there was Coach Smoggy, who we've been training together for years as coaches. There was a slight gap. I switched, and then it took a couple of years to then switch everything that we do. We
Mm-hmm.
slowly did it with our athletes. What we did do is say, okay, if that bothers you, let's do this instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying you just have to do that. So that was probably the toughest one, because there's fear involved. If you're used to what you do and you're like, this works, like our athletes get better, they go to the next level. How do we switch something that we've been doing that has such positive impact, but we know there's some negative in there? How
Mm-hmm.
do we just switch to something? What if everyone gets weaker? What if everyone doesn't perform well? And that wasn't the case. We knew that, but that's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And so when you did start to switch everything, like how'd you deal with that fear of, you know, maybe that internal thought that what happens if somebody does get weaker for their upcoming season? How did you and well, I guess you can't talk for for Schmody, but how do you deal with that kind of internal dialogue?
For me, it was easy because I brought myself to the brink of like, I got to stop playing
Mm-hmm.
or I have to switch. Like I knew I had to switch something, and I had to, instead of just following things blindly, I was like, I have to look at this and switch it, or I have to retire because I can't play 20 games, get hurt, and get another. I was at the point, my last surgery where the anesthesiologist was asking me, talking. He's like, "This is your fourth surgery." He's like, "You should probably maybe think about not doing this anymore."
Wow.
I was like, "You're probably right." But if that guy's saying that, and you don't want people going into your body and give that many surgeries, is just not good for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was easy. Plus, then I went through the process of going, "Wow, this is really works."
Mm-hmm.
Going this route and taking care of the body and using more functional training, it works. So I internalized it. It was easy for me. Now, if you haven't gone through that, that's the tougher decision. So there's a little bit of a gap there, but then once we did it, it was like, this was a no-brainer.
Yeah. And then, so when you did retire from professional hockey, how was that transition for you? Because you switched into coaching. How was that transition from leaving, not necessarily leaving the game, but you're leaving playing the game, and now you're coaching other athletes? How was that transition for you?
It was good, and I was lucky, and because I had an opportunity right away to do it. Um, it was great. Like it's probably one of the most important things in terms of going from that unknown of not playing, and then, okay, what am I going to do? And obviously I still training and working and doing different things. It was nice to have that,
Mm-hmm.
because you look at the game, and I think the things people miss the most, or at least I missed the most, was just having something to do and go, and then like-minded people, and then like the dressing room where now you have like the coach's room.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the best things. And yeah, a lot of it is like planning and doing different things, but then it's like being with your friends or your teammates. Those moments, those are the ones when you leave the game, you're like, it's not so much the playing, it was the playing sometimes, but it's more like the hanging out. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a huge opportunity for me, just to help with the transition from obviously playing, doing something your whole life, you dedicate your life to, your everything goes through that filter.
Yeah.
I think I look back and it'd be tough to, and I'm sure lots of people do it, but it would have been tougher to just say, I'm not doing that anymore, I'm going to get a job.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you were playing, how did you kind of deal with setbacks other than just, say, injuries? Like, how did you deal with, um, you know, maybe going into your freshman year at UMass, or dealing with, being sat? Like, how'd you deal with that kind of, say, adversities or obstacles in your career?
So I was lucky for a very long time. I was always a player that coaches looked at to play, and I was never really affected by coaches yell or scream, or and back in my day, it was the way coaches communicated was they had a lot more free reign to do
Yeah.
things. It was
Yeah.
a little bit, and even people before when I played, it was more of the things could get crazy sometimes. Like coaches were not, there's not these rules and regulations and social media and all these things. It was like,
Yeah.
but I was never bothered by it. I think it was just the way I was brought up. It's like, I was told that, like, yeah, coach might get mad. He might, it doesn't mean they don't like you. It doesn't mean anything. It just, so a lot of times I think I was just oblivious to a lot of it, just because of that mindset that I was given.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then probably my first year pro did really well. And then my second year pro, which was, I was, in my later 20s, was the first time in my life I got sad. So it was tough. It was tough. What I did was, and I remembered, I was in Cincinnati. It was the first time, and I was supposed to be a guy. Like I was, I had a good year in Toledo, was on the rookie team, made the all-star,
Mm-hmm.
made the all-star team as well in the all-star game. And then I went to Cincinnati, and I was supposed to be like a go-to guy, and I just stunk. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
very good at all. Like had a terrible start, and it was on a good team. So like there was other guys. So it's probably like 3/4 of the way into the season was the first time. It was like, okay, you're not playing today. It's like, it's the first time in my life I've been told, outside of an injury, I'm not playing. So I remember it being very tough, but I remember just going to the weight room and working out. And
Mm-hmm.
they liked that. I remember them going, he liked that. Like, and I was on a 2-way, so they communicate. I remember talking to the AHL team, and they're like, well, I was told like you got sat out, or like you're a healthy scratch, you went to the weight room. I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't do it to impress anybody. I just went to like blow off some steam and like get a workout in. And but that year was tough. That was a tough year because that wasn't the first time I was a healthy scratch. It happened a few more times.
Mm-hmm.
And at that level, levels above that, if you are a healthy scratch and guys step in and they do well,
Yeah.
it's very tough to get back in.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
days are kind of numbered at that.
Yeah.
And then so moving into kind of your coaching, right? Does that anything with your athletic career, did that help sculpt how you wanted to be portrayed as a coach, or how you wanted to try to help guide athletes? Like kind of your experiences, did that kind of fuel into your coaching philosophy per se?
I think so. And I just think, the person I am and my personality is probably more of like a player's coach. I appreciate those coaches that I had, the ones that, it's tough because I've been a head coach and assistant coach. So like, I understand head coaches have a certain role to play, and then assistant coaches have another role to play.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a head coach and I've been an assistant coach. I loved the ability to be assistant coach, where you can have those more one-on-one conversations and kind of, because it's one of the things I wish players understood more is it's a bit of a chess match, or it's kind of set up sometimes between head coaches and assistant coaches. Like a head coach really has to set the standard. Sometimes they have to be very hard on the team as a whole or individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes the head coaches will even go to the assistant coach. Like if they blast the team or something, they'll come out to the assistant coaches. Okay, go talk to them. Go in
Mm-hmm.
there, smooth it over, and or grab this player and talk to that player.
Mm-hmm.
Where sometimes players don't understand that dynamic of the relationship. But I like that because I like the, really talking one-on-one with players, or going in, and because I understand where they are and how hard it can be mentally sometimes to, and obviously this is what you do, is the mental side of it can be a crutch, or it can be the thing that gets you to that next level. It really can.
Mm-hmm.
So I always enjoyed that, and have the ability to have those conversations.
And then, so now, being the strength coach at Everest, right? What is something that you've kind of noticed with the younger generation coming up of athletes? Like, what is it that, kind of stands out to you? Is it kind of the passion, the physical aspect? What may it be?
I think people on the outside, or people, the previous generations, like to say things about the next generation, like, oh, they didn't go through what we went through in terms of like mental resilience and hard work and work ethic. Our kids are amazing. I don't know, because I spent, this is my 6th year at Everest,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I've lived in terms of in-person training. Obviously I do a lot of online and remote training as well, but in terms of that, those are the students I know, and those are the athletes I know. And these kids are incredible. Like what they do, and especially our kids, what they do on a given day, I never did any. I don't know if I could do it, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
having the dedication to get up, to play your sport, to work out, to go to school, and then on some occasions, not this year, but then go play with your team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I don't think they get enough credit of their resilience and how much hard work they get in, right? And it's a different generation. It's social media, and it's more screens and things like that. And people like to say, oh, these kids, all they do is play video. They don't. Like the kids we have they're incredible. Like they really are. And I think they don't even realize how much they do, and because they create that routine, it just becomes who they are.
Mm-hmm.
um but I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is like when I look at them, I'm always impressed. Do they struggle sometimes? Yes, I struggle, you struggle.
Mm-hmm.
There's things we all struggle with and we fail, but I'm always impressed with, and even like look at him like, I don't know, I would have been done
Yeah,
doing
like
all that. I was like, yeah, I don't know.
I remember even when Brendan would sign Mikey and I out of school, out of high school, and bring us to varsity, go on the ice, work out, and then we'd have practice later that night, or we'd have, say, we have a game. I was so gassed for whatever
Yeah.
was happening in the afternoon. And like once I started hearing about these sport academies, like I mean, the first thing I think of is burnout, right? You look
Yeah.
at a youth athlete, and especially with, maybe it's just because I know more about hockey, but with hockey, everybody thinks more is better. And this is something that you guys kind of preach as well. And like the parents, they might not be educated in how people develop physically and sport related, right? So, how is it that maybe you guys kind of prevent burnout, or what are some things that you guys kind of look for in your youth athletes?
And that's I guess maybe as an outsider, yeah, like people who look at an academy like what we do,
Mm-hmm.
um, but the advantage we have is that we can control our environment.
Mm-hmm.
um, and we don't, and we understand that. We understand the overload, we understand the overtraining, and we're always just trying to hit the sweet spot. And
Mm-hmm.
what we're able to give our athletes is, number one, is education around stimulus and response. The stimulus is doing the work, is working out, is skating, is being on the field, playing lacrosse, playing baseball, playing golf. The response is the rest and the recovery, the regeneration. And to
Mm-hmm.
teach and educate a younger athlete that at a young age is probably the most powerful thing, because the work it takes care of itself. They're here, they're
Mm-hmm.
at our gym, they're on the ice, they're in the classroom. That part of their schedule is set for them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what we can introduce is ways around nutrition, ways around recovery, ways around sleep. And we actually do recovery sessions, and we have an incredible AT, Jen Mark, who does yoga sessions, and think we do meditation. We do all those things that I didn't. All I knew was either you just work hard and then that's probably it.
Yeah.
And then you learn these other things when you go to school, and then you do yoga when you're at school and different things, but you don't see the value in it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're able to do is look at their full schedule and say, where can we fit in the rest? All the work is scheduled. Where can we fit in the rest, the recovery, the regeneration, the education? Um, and that's where people probably miss the boat the most times, is they're like, where can we do more? Oh, there's a gap here. How much more can we do in this gap? Oh, we got a gap here. Let's train even harder here. Where we go, all right, our work is taken care of. Here's a gap. That's a great spot for a recovery week. That's a
Mm-hmm.
great spot to do, sleep education, things like that. So, if you do it the right way, which, we're very confident that we do, and we are the experts in what we do, it
Mm-hmm.
can become very powerful and help them not only in athletics, but in life.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into real life and you're not playing anymore, me having two kids and working, like that's when you're really tired. And if you don't take care of yourself,
Yeah.
it's a slippery slope. Like it is a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm. And so, what does your kind of day look like? With training, with trying to balance, taking care of yourself while, looking after your kids. Like, what does your day kind of look like? How have you kind of regimented it, or what's your routine?
So I used to try to do everything. And obviously with young kids, I got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we're moving, and, life in COVID and in and out of lockdown. And I just try to control like the most important things. I try to control sleep as much as I can, even with young kids. We try to go to bed at the same time. We try to wake up. I try to wake up at the same time. That's a big one for me. When I do that, I feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get 7+ hours of sleep. Ideally, you get 8, but with young kids, you never know. But if I can get 7+, that's pretty good. Um, you know, I'm a I'm a big coffee drinker. So I know one of my limitations, I have to limit my coffee. Like I really do, because I'll
Yeah.
rely on it. So I'll have my coffee in the morning, but then I try to not have anything after 3. And those seem simple, but for me,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, okay, if I could do that, that really works. Now, in terms of, training, I don't train like I used to. If
Mm-hmm.
we're in the gym, our strength coaches, myself and the other coaches will train, 2 to 3 times a week. We'll get like a half-hour block where we're like, okay, we got to, we'll either grab one of the workouts the kids are doing, so we're going over it, we teach it better, but we'll try to get that in. Now at home, we try to get outside. We try to ride our bikes. We try to play hockey in the street. I might mix in like a quick circuit here or there with a kettlebell or something like that, but nothing fancy. No 2-hour workouts, that's for sure.
No, you don't have the luxury of that.
No, not anymore.
And so if you were, say, talking to the kind of your younger athletes, or say a younger you, what would be some advice, say they're, the OHL draft's coming up next month. What would be some advice that you would give to yourself if you were entering the OHL draft?
Well, we have the luxury and the opportunity to give advice all the time to, those types of kids and, athletes, and going through different parts of their development. And I think once you go through it and then you look back, and, we've had players like, they go to the NHL and they come in and talk to the kids. And we ask them of like, do you remember this game again? This, sometimes, you get caught in the moment of like, these kids have the most important game of their life, and it's do or die, and like that's consuming them, and they're 12 years old and they're playing a game at you know what I mean, like, so in the moment it's important, it is important, like it's a big deal. But 10 years down the line, if they still love, let's say, the game of hockey, and they're playing, and you ask them, do you remember that, they might or they might not, but it just doesn't seem that important to put so much stress on themselves over something that I always tell them it's a game you love. Keep that mindset that it's a game you love. Like, yes, it's going to be stressful sometimes. It's going to be, heartbreaking when you lose some big games and things like that. But you don't want to go down that road of always judging it as like a pass or a fail or a win or a loss, or this is devastating or it's not. You look at some of the best players in the game. They just always want to play. Like, even we've had the benefit, and I've had the benefit of coaching and experience and seeing those best players of like, they lose a game, they're upset, but then they're smiling and happy 20 minutes later. So it's the same thing around like drafts and things like that. Is, the old cliche, control what you can, but there's plenty of players that they don't get drafted high, or they don't go to a team, or they don't, whatever happens, that they have a long, successful, passionate career around hockey. It's not the be all and end all that sometimes we all make it is. And I think everyone's guilty of that.
And so before we kind of part ways, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, my Instagram is Marty Strength _hockey. That's my main account. And I'm pretty active on there. You see lots of posts that I do, but anyone out there who has questions, or whether it's hockey related, training related, I check it every day. So if you have questions, you can shoot me a DM and I'll get back to you.
All right. Thanks, Marty. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Brian.